All right, and I'm not going to mess with my screen. Well, I can't say that because I have it in full screen and I don't dare go back to Civic part, but I might gamble. So thank you, Vice Chair Cummins, for taking the point on that. Next, we have strategic assessment plan as an actionable item. We have Assistant Superintendent Darren Nielsen. Are you ready to present?
Yes, Chair, I am. If I could ask Jeff Van Holten to allow me permission to share my screen, that would be helpful as well. As I prepare to talk about this, though, I wanted to acknowledge the role that Chair Huntsman that you played in the beginning of this process. It was in a board meeting, I think somewhere in the fall of 2019. We were discussing the analysis that had been conducted on the RISE assessment data from the spring of 2019. And at the end of that, you asked me if I felt like we assessed too much or too little. And that question, I was unable to answer that. I don't know if you recall that brief discussion, but that triggered in my mind to start to wonder how could I answer that question for the board. And later that year, we held a seminar of sorts up at the University of Utah on balanced assessment systems, and brought Nancy Gerzon in, a national expert on formative assessments. And she presented to a large number of school administrators, and I know Chair Huntsman, you were there, and other board members as well. And then on May 7th of 2020, in your board meeting, you approved a recommendation from our Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee to authorize staff to develop an assessment strategic plan, again, designed to help, in part, answer the question that you had asked, Chair Huntsman, and also to help make sure that we're heading in the right direction in terms of assessment. So we established a group with the basis of that group being our Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, and we'll talk about them more briefly in just a moment. But the purpose of the work then was to really look and make sure that there was alignment with assessment and the strategic direction that the State Board of Education has adopted, including room within that to support the initiatives of personalized competency-based learning and the Portrait of a Graduate initiatives, which both of which continue to move forward and expand opportunities for our students. In addition to that, the timing worked out in such a way that we could utilize this group of individuals' time and effort to help inform the process of writing the RFP for this replacement contract that we're scheduled in the coming months to take on our shoulders of, and that is for the RISE assessment. If you remember, that was a 3-year emergency contract that we put in place. The conclusion of the challenges we had with our previous vendor. And so as a part of this work, we also took specific steps to address the needs that we have with that. And in the board supporting materials, you'll find the 75-page report that we'll talk about, and I'll bring some of those highlights. I hope many of you as board members have had a chance to look at that. So let's talk about the team briefly. Again, the Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, which is made up of members of our educational community and others that are appointed by the board, constituted the base of that group. And then we invited additional LEA and community representatives to participate. In total, we sent out just under 50 invitations for individuals in an effort to try to get broad representation from across the state involved in this work. We had 36 of those individuals accept the invitation, 12 of which were unable to complete their full commitment to the work, which leaves 24 members that were engaged in that. And you can find the names of those members and their titles and associations in the first part of that document. We also had staff, myself included, that served as technical assistants to the work, and then we enlisted the help of the Center for Assessment. And I actually have Dr. Scott Marion, the executive director for that, is available on our call today. He's been patiently attending our meeting. I'm sure he's working on the other side while he's doing that, but he's available as well for questions as we go through this brief presentation. But the Center for Assessment, they provide consulting services to probably 35 or more states on accountability and assessment issues. They're really a go-to organization in our country and provide a lot of expertise. And so we were very fortunate to have them facilitate this work that you see the product of today. So I wanted for you, board members, and the public, just to understand the amount of work that went into developing this report and the steps. This graphic depicts all of the different commitments, formal commitments for these committee members. So if you remember what I mentioned, there were some members of the original committee that were unable to fulfill their commitment. In part, that was due to, it was an extensive commitment. I want to take a moment to express my appreciation to our board members, Board Member Cannon and Board Member Earl. I think I've, in a written communication sent to the board earlier, just acknowledging my appreciation for them. They attended every one of these formal activities and performed their homework. If you count up the hours that were put into this, if you're an individual on the committee, you put in just under 40 hours of structured meeting time plus homework that was expected to be completed outside of that. That would be equivalent to a 3-semester college class, three credit hour college class that each member of this committee invested in their time and energy into developing the plan that we'll be discussing in a little more detail here shortly. We also, on that September 9th, we engaged a community that wanted to participate and get input. And then we also had a survey that we sent out. The survey responses, the details of this are included in the report, but we had 2,695 responses to the survey, with the vast majority of those being teachers. So 1,204 educators or teachers responded, but 892 parents and 431 administrators. We distributed this information across all of our listservs, including using the Community Council distribution list and the Utah School Boards Association, and then all of the groups that we work with as your staff at the State Board of Education is outreach to the districts and community members to try to give them an opportunity to respond to that. We felt very positive about the number of responses and the quality of responses we received to the survey. So in addition to the members of the committee, these 24 committee members that invested their time, we also solicited and got a good deal of feedback from across the state of Utah to inform this plan. So the focus of the work I touched on briefly before was really to provide recommendations regarding the pending RFP for grade 3 through 8 assessment, and then also to support long-term vision for student learning and school organization in the state of Utah. Hopefully this document lives for 5 to 10 years out as the assessment industry changes and evolves and improves over time. This work was designed to help us look forward and reimagine what state assessment could look like. One of the key foundations to our work, though, is to try to identify and make sure we have a lens of a balanced assessment system. I mentioned the work with Nancy Gerzon that was held in the fall of 2019, and that was really one of the underlying themes as we worked through these activities to develop the plan that you're considering today. So the overarching recommendations in the balanced assessment system, you'll find more details to that on pages 11 through 13 and page 38 of the report. But that's really the overarching recommendations that we should support the design and implementation of a balanced assessment system, recognizing that each assessment is designed for a certain purpose and certain users, and just making sure that we at the State Board have a lens of and ensuring that we do our best to make sure assessments are used for the purpose with which they're developed and for the audiences and groups that they have. In addition, we enlisted the guiding principles. We talked about early on in this process, these guiding principles around assessment. And more details about those can be found, these core principles, on pages 14 and 15 of the document. So recommendations, we'll talk briefly about these for phase 1, which again is really targeted towards this RFP that we're preparing to release in January of 2021. There was discussion around removing subscores for individual and school reports. And the reason for that is it would allow for potentially a shorter test in each of these content areas if we're not trying to include enough questions for each individual student around reporting categories. And that came out of this work as one of the recommendations. The discussion around that also centered on, well, we have teachers who use the reporting category information that comes from the summative assessments in their instructional programs, and administrators that use that. The committee looked at research and had lengthy discussion. I can tell you also that our technical advisory committee in previous years, who are educational measurement experts, always have expressed caution about using reporting categories or subscores for our summative assessments because of concerns about reliability related to those, because we typically don't have a large number of questions in each test for each subscore reporting category area. So the focus of our discussion was then that teachers would utilize the existing benchmark assessments for more precise instructional guidance rather than relying on the end-of-year assessment data to provide that guidance. There was discussion and a recommendation around prioritizing the use of short constructed response items with the hope that we would ensure that we get an opportunity for our students through these assessments to elicit this deeper understanding of content knowledge and not use precious time in assessments for items that don't elicit those types of responses. The next recommendation is one that it's probably would be the most significant change moving forward if the state board chooses to move forward with this. Include a common writing prompt at each grade level, coupled with a variety of shorter writing prompts to improve score reliability. There was lengthy discussion about this and strong interest through our surveys and also the committee work to reinstitute writing at each grade level. Again, it gives us the ability to measure learning at a deeper level, and then to continue to prioritize adaptive testing was the other primary recommendation around this RFP or the immediate work of the state board staff related to assessment. Phase 2, we talked about these non-summative assessments. The State Board of Education has a strong history of providing non-summative assessments. Those would be things like our Utah Compose. It's utilized by teachers across the state of Utah across grade levels. Our UTIPS formative tool, which is utilized by teachers of all content areas across all grade levels in our state. SHMOOP, which is a formative tool, a preparation tool for college readiness, or in our case, the ACT assessment. Our benchmarks are in terms associated with RISE, and then our Utah Standards benchmarks associated with the Utah Aspire Plus assessment. The committee and the work that we did indicates strong support for continuing to provide those tools to our educators. But again, making sure those are not compliance oriented, but available for our teachers to assist them in their day-to-day work. The second bullet would be a change for our teachers, and that would be that we would reconfigure our benchmark assessments to a finer grain size at the standard level rather than the reporting category level, which would allow for more precision in how they utilize those in their teaching practices. Next bullet, provide increased communication and professional learning opportunities around test use, interpretation, assessment literacy. This was a strong message throughout the work of the group, that one role that the State Board of Education could and should play is increasing the outreach that we have to teachers and administrators in our education community and providing professional learning opportunities to increase their capacity, especially around assessment literacy. And then again, just a real strong emphasis that these tools be made available but not required with the teachers across the state. Finally, we have, as we look forward, especially around Portrait of a Graduate and personalized competency-based learning, As the board is aware of, progress is being made with developing the competencies around the portrait of a graduate. And there's a great momentum around that initiative. This committee and the work that we conducted with our outreach indicates that there's a strong interest in the State Board of Education being actively involved, but around, again, focusing our role on helping LEAs determine how to assess rather than trying to develop a broad range of state assessments that then would be delivered across the state of Utah. So we could disseminate best practice, support their professional learning communities, and provide professional learning is the recommendation that's contained in this plan or this assessment strategic plan. And then to support through the full state assessment system principles associated with personalized competency-based learning. So is the next slide, which will be my last one, really will focus in on the personalized competency-based learning. But before we move to that, I want to talk briefly about the specific recommendations around portrait of a graduate. The first one was that we would provide, the State Board of Education could provide guidance for operationally defining the various competencies so they can be assessed. Number two, to curate a resource bank seeded with high quality assessments or exemplars that LEAs could use. Number three was providing professional development resources regarding performance-based assessments and other tools. And then finally, the fourth one was to convene district personnel to create assessments and develop other resources. So assist LEA representatives in developing assessments that then they could implement as they move forward with Portrait of a Graduate. So the final slide has to do with this personalized competency-based learning framework, which the committee examined that tool, which was approved by the board in recent months. These seven expectations related to that, we'll talk briefly about these, and then we'll open up for questions, Chair.
Okay.
These are the elements related to personalized competency-based learning, and there's interest and recommendations to this committee that we try to implement these throughout the assessment system, remembering that an assessment system includes both summative assessments where the purpose and the audience is for school accountability at the state or the federal requirement level. We have formative tools that can be used in a formative process. You have teacher-based, teacher-developed assessments, again, if we consider the full system, and you might also have a district or LEA developed or purchased assessments. And so the recommendation here is we try to implement these seven as possible as we look forward, not only with the RFP that we're going to shortly, but also decisions around assessment in the next 5 to 10 years are very forward-looking. So number one, assessments include authentic application of acquired knowledge and skills. Some might say, well, what does that look like? In our current system, areas where we've tried to implement this is developing cluster-based questions instead of standalone questions, and the way that the industry has allowed for the development and delivery of technology-enhanced items. In addition, when you can build in performance component, like we have in our skills tests that we deliver through precision exams, and then our DLI or dual language immersion assessments, where they are they're very connected to authentic application of their language skills that they're learning in their target language instruction. So those are some examples in our current system. Found across our current system that are related to that, but this guidance helps us as we look forward to new and innovative ways to assess students across our system. Number two, students have multiple opportunities to demonstrate what they know and can do. This can be a challenging expectation when we talk about certain types of assessments. Because of the restraints that are placed on high stakes accountability assessments for school. But we do have to have some examples within our system where students can have multiple opportunities. One of those would be with our cadence reading. Well, it's true we have benchmark assessments that students will take one time. They also have progress monitoring assessments that teachers will deliver in between the benchmark assessment systems, which again gives a student multiple opportunities to demonstrate both achievement and progress. With our RISE and Utah Aspire Plus benchmarks, or Utah Compose and SMOOP, teachers are able to deliver those assessments multiple times to students. And so if they're unsuccessful with certain content standards and demonstrating mastery of those, reteaching can be conducted, and then students can be given additional opportunities. So those are some examples of what that looks like in our current system. And again, these recommendations help us look forward to trying to innovate and make changes, substantial changes in other areas of our system going forward. Number 3, students are supported in demonstrating learning in multiple ways. This is something that a lot of classrooms, especially highly effective classrooms, allow for, where students can demonstrate competency in learning through not only a paper pencil test, perhaps a presentation, perhaps an interview. It becomes challenging with state assessments in this area, but this guidance again points our vision forward as we work with vendors and as we push the industry to expand its capabilities into the next 5 to 10 years. Number 5, assessments are taken when the student is ready. Again, within our current system, we have benchmarks, in-terms, and progress monitoring that allow for that to happen. And we have some constraints around high stakes assessments. Number 4, I think I skipped, so let's back up to that. Number 4, assessments have a performance component. An example of where that already exists within our current assessment system is with our precision exams, CTE skills testing. There's typically on those assessments a multiple choice portion of the test, and then a performance portion of the test where a teacher observes a student in that particular skill and then submits information into the system, and those two elements are combined for the student's overall score. Dual language immersion is another great example here, where it's their performance and being able to speak and write and read and listen in their target language that is directly relates or produces their score. And then in our 5th and 8th grade writing is an example of performance in an academic area, and it's directly related, and it produces the interpretation of their ability in those areas. Number 6, assessments provide descriptive feedback for guiding student learning. This is an area where throughout the work of this group, there's discussion, and there's a specific part within the document that focuses on helping us improve our reporting functionality. And so this one speaks to the way that we report information to both students and teachers and their parents about the outcomes or the product of their various assessments, regardless of the format that it's in. We have made some headway over the last 4 or 5 years in this area, with instant scoring would be an example here, where when a student completes an assessment, they get feedback in a more timely way than they previously have. Certainly than when I was a student, or many of the board members when you were students, and it would take a long time to get our scores back. So there's headway being made there, and I expect continued progress in that area. And then number 7, assessments provide a positive and meaningful learning experience. In an ideal world, when we're measured as a learner, whether it's as a youth or an adult learner, that experience has a positive feel to it. It doesn't have a deficit-oriented approach. It doesn't tell us so much what we don't know, but it could tell us what we know and then what we need to learn next to be able to continue to progress. And there's certainly areas for us to make improvements in this area as we move forward with assessment. So those are some examples around the personalized competency-based learning framework within our existing system. And again, this document points us forward-looking to really try to look at what the next generation assessments will look like, and to help push our industry and be a leader in the state of Utah within a state assessment in moving forward. Again, overall, I would think the primary tone of this report is that we need to focus on ensuring there's a balanced assessment system that is aligned with our standards. One of the challenges of having a balanced assessment system is in order to have a fully balanced assessment system, it needs to be curriculum aligned. In Utah and many states, curriculum decisions are made at the local level. And I think in this meeting earlier today, we had a reference to that curriculum decisions are made at the local level. The committee was strong on supporting continued support for local decisions around many things, including curriculum. So our focus on creating a balanced assessment system would be supporting our districts who make decisions around curriculum in helping to establish and ensure their teachers, their students, their community are experienced as balanced assessment system as possible. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to give Dr. Scott Marion an opportunity to speak, if that would be okay.
You bet.
Dr. Marion, I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but since you've attended this meeting all day, I didn't want to pass over you. And perhaps
I appreciate that, Darren. You know, Darren really summarized this expertly, and I just want to say, we've led these sorts of efforts in, I think we're 6 or 7 states now, Wyoming, Alabama, South Dakota, Oklahoma, I'm missing some in there, but and it's a gratifying process because you get really broad range of stakeholder engagement in the assessment process. And, you know, Darren showed you the list of meetings. Ordinarily, we do this in person and we do it over several months and, you know, 4 or 5 day long or day and a half in-person meetings, but you stretch them out over webinars and it gets long, but people really hung in there. And I think the recommendations are powerful. I think that it sets a vision for Utah going forward. And as Darren noted, Utah's already a leader in assessment, particularly in the range of assessment options the state provides other than the end of year assessments to help support learning and teaching. I also want to say that, you know, Darren was a fabulous leader of this work. This is not easy work. And on top of all the other stuff that he has to manage. But board members Earl and Cannon were star pupils. They attended, I think, almost every single meeting and made incredibly valuable contributions to the process and the product. So we're happy to answer. I'm happy to answer any questions, but you should congratulate yourselves for authorizing this and congratulate your staff for carrying it out.
And thank you. Assistant Superintendent Nielsen, we're to questions now, aren't we?
Yes. So
I just have one. Is there, what, do we need to have more assessment out there so that I'm looking at, well, I've been viewing you and then Dr. Marion, there's something about snow and there's something about Utah's drought. Is there something we've got to do to get more assessment out so we can have more snow, or am I barking up the wrong tree yet?
We both love skiing.
Okay. Without that said, I just want to reference a couple things. There's a lot of stakeholders and there's stakeholders' expectations. I just want to compliment this document on this executive summary. Usually an executive summary is very short and brief. Because this is a very serious issue, but more of a tool that we use within all of our LEAs, and then we also justify certain things to the State Board of Education and also to our legislators. But that executive summary is about 4.35 pages of brief information. But as I went through it, I'm like, what would we delete? I mean, this isn't a true executive summary, and it reflects the work that's been done by so many. And so those 3 phases are very relevant, and I want to applaud you for the work that's happened. And maybe one of the benefits with this pandemic is we'll be able to get everyone together quickly into these meetings instead of trying to schedule a face-to-face as some lessons learned. But let's get to some board member questions and comments. Board member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Darren. I have a question. Was there any discussion, we're going to be looking at a 5 to 10 year. So was there any discussion on having the ability to do online proctored testing?
Yeah, so board member Belknap, that's a great question. It wasn't specific to the work of this committee. I don't recall, and Dr. Marion can correct me, I don't recall that we spent time talking about proctoring of functionality within the discussion. We'll remind the board though that I think it was last year as you modified or updated, which is an annual requirement, the testing ethics policy. There were some changes made to that to support virtual proctoring. Your staff also was working with a online charter school prior to COVID-19, piloting virtual proctoring of the RISE benchmark assessments. And so there's energy in Utah around trying to move forward and advance the possibility or inclusion of remote proctoring to a greater extent than we do currently. The energy behind that really comes from trying to meet the needs of our online charter schools and recognizing, again, regardless of COVID, we have students who choose online learning institutions some of which do very well in those settings, and it's very difficult. Remember, Belknap, you can speak to this personally. It's difficult to get students who've chosen that method to travel sometimes an hour or more to a location where an online school can provide secure proctoring. There's some areas that our industry needs to move forward with before I personally would feel comfortable recommending online proctoring for all testing. Earlier this morning, I showed a timeline and the types of tests or all the state assessments, some of which are available currently for remote proctoring. We have student privacy issues related to remote proctoring when it involves items that are secure or protected, because then we bring in to the environment oftentimes a third-party vendor who it's their expertise to have secure proctoring environments. But within a K-12 population, you have some real privacy issues that need to be overcome. And then some of our students with learning disabilities currently require an adult to be present when the assessments are being delivered to be able to meet the needs of their accommodation plans. And so there's some real disparities in online proctoring's ability to meet those needs as well. So we're on a positive trend or forward looking. I expect, and I think Dr. Marion would agree with me, that there'll be a day in our future when our industry, the assessment industry, is able to accommodate remote proctoring for all types of assessments in public education setting, but I don't think we're there yet. And the committee didn't address that level of detail in their planning.
Okay, I just had to bring that up because even in our settings right now, we have students who will not be coming to school for a variety of reasons, but they belong to their boundary school. Chair, may I ask the next one?
Yes, please.
Thank you. The other one I have, you brought up something about preparing for college and looking at the ACT. However, the ACT may become null and void at some point. Does this, you're going to have to help me I read this, but did it say something like ACT or did it say something about college prep?
Well, so the plan, the work group really, other than helping write the RFP for the 3 through 8 assessment, the rest of the document is really forward-looking and broader than any particular assessment, recognizing that assessments come and go. They can be changed through the legislature, or in some cases, the State Board of Education could change, either delete or add an assessment. And so the work didn't focus on individual assessments as much as these philosophies and principles around assessment and trying to point us forward. But I mentioned SHMOOP as one of the formative tools that's currently available. And those contracts expire and they come back up for renewal. The board, I do want to make sure the board knows and the public who are listening to us know that this is a guiding document. When it comes to decisions about particular assessments or products, the board has a distinct authority to make those decisions outside of this document that we're talking about today. As we bring those issues back to the board, when they come up, when contracts are ready for renewal or other decisions related about that. This document isn't designed to usurp that authority in any way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cummins?
Yes, thank you. Just a really quick question on the phase 1 recommendation on writing assessment. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about the extensive time that was taken in the initial SAGE test for writing. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind speaking to your recommendation. Was the committee able to find a good balance between in this recommendation? Was there an attempt to find balance between the time taking the test and the desire of many to include writing? Because it felt at the time like it was an either or conversation, like we either have writing or we don't, based on the time that it takes to have that section of the assessment. So if you don't mind speaking to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. My recollection is that the committee was sensitive to that discussion. You know, it was a committee the board had, I think, called Removing Barriers, that came to the board with a recommendation of removing writing, or at least reducing the amount of writing that's being assessed. That happened before I came to the state board, so I could, if I'm a little off on that, somebody on this call could probably correct me. So writing in Utah, and this is called out in the report. I believe we've gone through this cycle back in 2010-ish. We administered writing through the direct writing assessment in grades 5 and 8, and then with the introduction of SAGE test, writing was included in grades 3 through 8, and I believe there were 2 prompts per grade level. At some point after that, and I don't have the date in front of me, the decision was made to go down to 1 prompt per grade level. And then finally, the decision to go back to assessing writing only in grades 5 and 8. So you'll see some detail around some surveys that the committee members responded to. There were a couple of options related to delivering writing. There was strong support for writing in each grade. If you go back to the recommendation about removing subscores, that's a nod in a way to trying to balance. And if we reduce the subscore reporting requirement that's currently in our RISE system, then it will allow us to shorten the overall assessment. And so that's a nod to this balance of trying to make sure that the tests are a reasonable amount of time. There was strong appetite from the committee and the surveys we sent out for value for measuring writing in each of the grade levels. Dr. Marion, I don't know if you want to add to that. I know you guys, I think we spent a couple of different webinars where we talked about writing.
We did. It's good to see you again, Brittany. It's we did spend a lot of time, and some of the board members know this, that I and my company, the Center for Assessment, have been working closely with Utah Assessment and Accountability since 2003. So I've been on this journey of writing, and actually we introduced it at one of the meetings, you know, sort of like the circle of life of writing in Utah, that we started with, you know, direct writing assessment. We're back to the direct writing assessment, and now we want to go back. But it came through. We didn't just take it the first time through. We did numerous polls, and the committee had an opportunity to revisit recommendations, and we pressed them on it. But you know, this is a recommendation. It's they know they're an advisory committee. They're not a regulatory committee, and so this is there's pretty strong recommendation. And you know, honestly, you know, one member dissented. It was the only area of recommendations where we had one dissent, and that was because of this history that, you know, we've been down this road, and we put writing back in, worried that there'll be complaints and it'll get taken out. So but by and large, and the survey respondents, you know, Darren mentioned the 2,000 or so survey respondents were asked about writing, and it was a strong push for that. So
You have a
Chair, may I
follow-up?
follow up? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer. So I guess my last question, because I believe these recommendations are going to inform the RFP for assessment, do I understand that correctly? So
Yeah.
is this recommendation, is the writing recommendation more limited than that original SAGE test that had 2 long prompts? Because that the original pushback was pretty significant. I mean, students were sitting in front of those writing assessments for a very long time in certain cases, and that's why we kind of pulled back in the first place. And so does this recommendation address that that significant time component that was a problem in that original SAGE assessment?
If I may, there's go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, go ahead.
Board,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Darren, you go.
Well, I was going to ask for clarification on the question, so go ahead with your response.
Okay, maybe I'll muddle it so bad. So board member Cummings, you're right. Back in the early days of SAGE, there were 2 writing prompts that, probably around 30 to 45 minutes each. And the committee wrestled with that. The challenge with writing, assessing writing, when we only have a single prompt, you have what we call in our field the problem of one. Did I do well on that prompt because it was perfectly targeted to my interests, or did I do well on that prompt because I'm a really good writer? So you want to have another look at that, right? Well, but then the challenge is then you have a really long test. And so one of the compromises is that the work group recommended having a single writing prompt, but also having other shorter types of writing questions, whether they be editing types of things or other types of very short things that people could write that wouldn't take that amount of time. So sort of beef up our feeling of credibility of the writing score. So not to go all the way back to the 2 prompt thing.
Last question, Chair.
Yes.
Okay. So when you the original SAGE didn't have, I don't believe, timed students, so they could sit in front of their writing prompt for hours. Is that, if I remember correctly? And so does this recommendation put a time limit on students so that they can be assessed in their writing, but not feel like they have to sit in front of a computer for hours at a time, muddling, trying to perfect a piece of writing?
Right. Board member Cummings, that the committee did not discuss that, and honestly, we tried to stay out of those sort of super operational details because those are better left to the agency professionals when it comes to implementing the test. And that's, I think people will have learned from that. I know the same thing. We work in Massachusetts, and they have kids who sit for the whole school day because they can't let it go. I have staff members like that too, that I'd like to actually hurry up and get their writing done faster. So, but I understand that. So I think that the staff could implement that without a committee recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. Board member Cannon.
Thank you. I feel like it was a great privilege for me to be part of this committee. I learned so much. I found myself reading assessment documents in my free time, and
we love it. Another convert.
brain size and all these things I didn't know before. But through my lens, there was a real interest in the committee in having some kind of writing assessment. I believe that several of us felt like what gets assessed gets taught, and writing is such a critical skill for students, especially students that are college bound, that the idea of giving them opportunities to hone their skills as they go along was one of the things that I felt good about in terms of making the recommendation to have a writing prompt and shorter writing questions. So thank you for the opportunity. It was a wonderful experience.
Thank you for your great contributions.
Assistant Superintendent Nielsen and Dr. Snow, I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time. Oh, Board Member Earl.
Sorry, I was letting other people get their questions and stuff in. I did enjoy this time as well. As board canon, I think I was the one dissenting voice on the writing prompt. Just I do have concerns about the time and other things, and if this is the only way we get kids to write is by assessing them, I'm a little concerned with that. We might want to look at our other practices. But anyways, this was good. They were enjoyable to work with. I think we came up with quite a few great recommendations, and look forward to moving forward with this.
Thank you, Board Member Earl. You were a detailed contributor. You actually were my closest reader. That was great. So.
Board Member Marsh. Board Member Marsh. Mark Marsh.
Sorry, I was muted. Are you in a position where we're ready for a motion?
Absolutely.
I would make a motion then that we accept the assessment strategic plan as presented to us.
Okay, do we have a second? No, Board Member Marsh, you can't second that, by the way.
Second.
I'll second.
Oh, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
That is Board Member Nielsen.
Okay. The motion before the board, did you want to speak to that, Board Member Marsh?
No, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay. The motion before the board is that the board accept the assessment strategic plan. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, please vote. Okay, let's see. Board Member Davis, not seeing a. The voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Marion and Assistant Superintendent Nielsen. We are moving along.
Thank you all.